Welcome back to another episode of Bucks Latest presented by Fan Arch. Once again, I'm your host, Dean Simon, and before we get into everything, please make sure to leave a like, leave a comment down below, and subscribe. We are on the road to 2,000 subscribers, so if that's a journey you feel compelled to join, please consider pressing that big red subscribe button down below. Turn on post notifications so you don't miss out on future Milwaukee Bucks updates, and away we go on a jam-packed weekend with bouts against the Charlotte Hornets and the Los Angeles Lakers. Of course, like it says in the segment description, an up and down weekend for the Bucks with a win over the Hornets in the NBA Cup game, 147-134, and then the blowout loss to the Los Angeles Lakers, still without LeBron, even though reports have surfaced that he's been practicing with the G League squad and now he's kind of coming around and ramping up to his season debut. But we will get into that game. One thing that I wanted to do though before we talk about those actual games is I wanted to kind of look around at the updated ranks for the Milwaukee Bucks as a team this year, because there are a couple of things that after this weekend, after this pair of games, that are pretty interesting. Number one is that, and this is a topic that I'll surely get into as the episode goes forward, that the Milwaukee Bucks now rank dead last in offensive rebounds per game at 8.8, lower than the Sacramento Kings, lower than the what's another team that you wouldn't think? Then I don't know, the Washington Wizards. Any team in the NBA, the Milwaukee Bucks are the worst offensive rebounding team in the NBA. And in terms of opponent offensive rebounds, the Milwaukee Bucks are 24th. So they get the least amount of offensive rebounds. They let up the sixth most amount of offensive rebounds to their opponents. So this is just amazing, great developments here for the Milwaukee Bucks. And in terms of rebounding in general, the Bucks are sitting pretty at 28th in the NBA at 40.2 rebounds per game. And this you'll see is a common trend with recent games from the Bucks that they'll relatively play clean games. And on the season, they are what in turnovers? They're eighth in fewest turnovers per game. So they're playing relatively clean games. Of course, they're number 2 in the league in 3-point percentage with 41.1% of their threes going down. And from the free throw line, though, also dead last by a wide margin in free throw percentage, under 70% at 69.9%, number 30 in the league. Um, this is a common thing that we'll see here, a common thread where the Bucks will play clean games and then will end up losing due to these kind of technicalities where it's they're not grabbing enough rebounds, they're not attempting or hitting enough free throws, they're not allowing their opposing teams to get less off it, things like this. So a very up and down. Up and down is kind of an understatement to a degree. But we'll talk about the up. And even the up wasn't even that up. The 147-134 overtime win in that NBA Cup game at home against the Charlotte Hornets, where Con Knippel went off for a career high 32 points, hit several clutch threes, namely the one was that to send it to overtime, that first one that he hit, I believe it was. But yeah, 32 points for Con Knippel, 32 for Miles Bridges, 64 combined points between the two. But of course, it wasn't enough, and the Bucks started to pull away towards the final minutes of overtime. But one thing that I will say is that the Hornets did not have Ryan Kalkbrenner in this game, who made such a massive impact for the Hornets. Had 17 points, 9 boards, didn't miss a shot, going one-on-one against Miles Turner. And again, something that I feel like is going to be a common thread here is that Miles Turner, though he had a fantastic offensive game for the Bucks, his best of the season, he didn't really, I don't want to say he didn't offer any resistance down low, because it wouldn't be true. But there are some instances where he's being challenged by the Con Knippels of the world, by the Colin Sextons of the world, where it feels like he could have done more to affect their shot, but it just seems like he wasn't in the position to do so. And those things were kind of scary to watch in real time. But man, Con Knippel had an amazing game, and of course Ryan Rollins had a great game as well. I'll actually pull up the stats from that game if I can find them. No, actually, it was the 14th because it was a back-to-back. There it goes. Giannis with 25, 18, and 7. But the one thing that I wanted to mention, other than LaMelo Ball actually playing in this game in the absence of Ryan Kalkbrenner. So Ryan Kalkbrenner did not take the floor for the Hornets in this NBA Cup game. LaMelo Ball did, and they were relying heavily on Musa Diabate to do much of the same that he did in the first meeting against the Hornets, where he was just grabbing offensive rebounds left and right. And would you know it, he did it again. Still grabbed more offensive rebounds than defensive rebounds in this one, 6 to 5 for a total of 11 boards. And though he did foul out, it was another thing. Like, there was just no resistance, it seemed like, and it felt as though the entire Milwaukee Bucks team, including Giannis, including Miles Turner, including Bobby Portis, had to spend most of their attention on holding back Musa Diabate from having an impact on the offensive rebounds. And it seemed as though those three against him, it still didn't even matter remotely. And he was just going to keep being as active as ever on the offensive boards. So that's just a very, very huge point of concern, because it's not like the Bucks don't have rebounding talent, though Miles Turner throughout his career has been a pretty below average rebounder for his size, for his position, but that's besides the point. Having Giannis on this team to pair with Miles Turner and, a body like Bobby Portis, you would think that these guys would have more of an impact on not allowing guys like Musa Diabate, though he is very strong, very athletic, long arms. You would think they'd be able to hold him back from not grabbing as many offensive boards as he did. Also, Sion James was very impressive in this one, and again, his activity on the boards as well. Finished with 7 in this game. He was great, but the Bucks game plan towards the final minutes of the fourth quarter and into overtime was just kind of give Sion James as much as he can eat, give him open threes, and of course it paid off in some instances and didn't in others. But finished 2 of 7 from 3-point range, and that was kind of, we're just going to give him concede those open looks to the Sion Jameses of the world, and we're just going to live with it. They did limit Colin Sexton's impact on this one by a pretty decent margin, and also Trey Mann had a pretty awesome game as well. But in the end, it didn't really matter, as it was, again, Giannis, 12 of 18 from the field for 25, 18 and 7, though he did have 7 turnovers. This was just fantastic. And even with the 18 assists, it might sound crazy, but it felt like he could have had more, not just by way of, oh, he passes to AJ Green and he misses a shot that he tends to make, but that he chose not to hit the open guy in certain instances, and especially towards the second half of the game, where he wanted to kind of take the onus upon himself to get to impose his will and get towards the basket, where he could have had Gary Trent Jr. for a relatively open three, but he just chose not to pass it or not to make that play, that swing pass. And like, I feel like he could have easily ended with 22 or 23 assists in this one, but it was not to be. Something that I will say, though, is that the bench completely tanked this game for the Bucks. If you look at the plus minus, all of the starters have a plus minus of 18 or more, and the highest was Miles Turner with a plus 27. But the bench, Jericho Sims a -5, Gary Trent Jr. a -15, team low, Cole Anthony a -13, Bobby Portis -11, Gary Harris a -12. And even though what I will say about Gary Harris is that, of course, the episode after I say that anytime he checks into the game, it's just he's having terrible nights. He just comes in and misses a three or makes a turnover or whatever. Now he's had a stretch where he's playing pretty well. And he had 10 points in this one, knocked down 2 of his 3 threes, but that's besides the point. The bench tanked this game for the Milwaukee Bucks, and it was up to Ryan Rollins, it was up to Miles, and up to Giannis. And Kyle Kuzma, who had 29, a game high for the Milwaukee Bucks in this one. Honestly, didn't even realize I hadn't mentioned it because I was thinking more about this most recent game against the Lakers. But Kyle Kuzma in this one was absolutely phenomenal with 29 and 10, 4 steals. And this was just the culmination of everything that we've been talking about from him kind of coming together. The aggressiveness with his scoring, coupled with the activity on defense, and the rebounding help, it all just came together. And the fact that he had a couple of threes go down in huge spots that definitely were like they gave him a confidence boost, at least you would imagine, because that 3-point shot has not gone down relatively at all to start this year. But a couple of huge corner threes off of kick out passes from Giannis, again in big spots. Hopefully that leads to him feeling a little bit more confident. But now we can kind of talk about the downturn of this whole thing with the 119-95 loss on the back-to-back. And something that I will say about this one is that Giannis, after the game, he was asked by, I think it was Eric Name of The Athletic, went up to Giannis and asked him basically, how do you feel about this one? Do you guys think that you were just a little bit too tired coming off the back-to-back? Like, do you guys think that going forward in the future, you guys will have better performances on the second night of these things? And Giannis's answer, I thought, was perfect and just flat out everything that the Bucks needed to hear, the Bucks coaching staff needed to hear, because it's just the true sentiment of what's going on here, is that throughout this season, and it's what Giannis said, the Bucks are going to be tired. They're going to be playing on the second nights of back-to-backs, and being tired is not an excuse for how they played in this one, for their shot not going down. You could say that, oh man, they just didn't have enough legs under them for their jump shots or whatever, and that caused their field goal percentage, 3-point percentage to tank. But that's not an excuse. And Giannis pointed out that, didn't the Lakers also, they were coming on the second night of a back-to-back, so they obviously weren't as tired as the Milwaukee Bucks in the same kind of situation and circumstance, though the Bucks' previous game went into overtime and it was very physical and all that. But they were also coming off of a back to back, and that was kind of Giannis's main point. So the tiredness excuse, it's not an excuse, and the Bucks just have to power through these things. But besides that, simply put, the Milwaukee Bucks got Luka, at least through the first half and into the third quarter, where Luka had 41 for this game, 41, 9, and 6, but he had 21 of those in the first half and another 15, I believe, in the third quarter. And it wasn't just the threat of Luka scoring. Can I just say, Luka Doncic, a really, really underrated player here, and this is a crazy take, I know, but he is phenomenal with his way of distracting the defense and looking one way, throwing the ball the other. That's what killed the Milwaukee Bucks this entire game. There was no beating it. There was no getting around it. Where if Luka looks to the corner, everybody's just shifting that direction, and DeAndre Ayton's wide open on his roll to the basket, or it's Jackson Hayes, or Maxi Kleber's open on the wing. He is just an absolute master, and I've never seen someone, at least in my time of actually like watching live NBA basketball, someone at 26 years old, maybe other than LeBron James, someone at 26 years old who is able to manipulate the defense in the way that he does. And the craziest thing about it was that it wasn't just him. It was then the Lakers got Austin Reeves in the second half, where he was doing the same exact thing, misdirections and looking one way, throwing the ball the other. And that was aside from his individual scoring output of 25 points, finished with also 8 assists, 6 boards in this one. What I will say is this was another game, yet again, where the Bucks played a, sort of a cleaner game. They obviously did not knock down the shots necessary to get back in this one, and they were down 29 or 31 at halftime. But this is another game where the Bucks lose the rebounding battle, they lose the assist battle, they lose the steal battle, and they tied with the blocks battle. They also lost the turnover battle. And I'd be willing to guess that no, they actually won the offensive rebounding battle. What a surprise. Um, but it's just these kinds of things where it's their own, it's really an effort thing where they're just losing these sorts of aspects of the game, and then it all snowballs into this one thing where you look back on the box score, and this is where the Milwaukee Bucks lost this game, aside obviously from the ridiculous difference in field goal and 3-point percentage and all that. But man, this was just a rough one. And I will say, don't want to make it seem like it's a little thing that can kind of be glossed over, that the Bucks, this was yet another game where they shot, let's see the actual numbers, 16 of 24 from the free throw line. They shot 67% on 24 free throws, and the LA Lakers shot 91% on 33 free throws. They knocked down 30 of their 33 free throws in this one. 16 of 24 for the Bucks, and this is just, again, giving up 14 extra points on free throws is just, that's not going to cut it. It's just not. So man, this is, and the fact that Luka shot 20 of those free throws himself and knocked down 18 of them, this is not going to cut it at all. The interior defense was really embarrassing, if you want to put it frankly, because these DeAndre Ayton rolls to the rim and everything of the sort were just completely uncontested and wide open. Same thing for Jackson Hayes. And one thing for the Bucks, because in that first half, especially the second quarter, they went completely cold from 3-point range, could not hit a thing, could not throw a rock in the ocean. But I think something that had to do with that was the Lakers personnel. And that was guys like, even though I think they're pretty underrated, guys like Jackson Hayes and Maxi Kleber and even Jake LaRavia, they hold these physical advantages over certain guys on the Bucks, maybe like a Bobby Portis or whoever, that Jackson Hayes can pretty effectively rotate on defense because he is massive. He's super athletic. And that's the thing. He can move very well for his size at 7 feet tall. So he's able to kind of rotate, and guys like him and Maxi Kleba, who are bigger but more agile, they can kind of nullify the Bucks kind of swing offense because they can rotate along the 3-point line very well and kind of run the Bucks off the 3-point line. And when the Bucks weren't hitting their threes, that's exactly what the Jackson Hayes and Maxi Klebas of the world were kind of baiting them into, because again, they can just move very well and take away a lot of those advantages for the Bucks off of their kind of quick good shot to great shot kind of actions. So Jackson Hayes, I will say in this one, was super underrated, both, on offense and defense. He was also catching lobs, same kind of deal as DeAndre Ayton, but just doing so in a more athletic capacity, of course. But moving forward, we're going to try and get these things out of our heads, because this next stretch coming up is absolutely massive. Going against some of the best that the Eastern Conference has to offer over the next 6 games, and 5 of 6 are going to be against Eastern Conference opponents that are in the playoff picture, or kind of trying to hang on to playoff spots. Because Monday, it's the Cleveland Cavaliers away. Thursday, back home against the Philadelphia 76ers, though it will be a homestand for the 3 games consecutively after the Cavs game. It's going to be a very, very tough schedule. So Cavs on Monday, Sixers on Thursday, then the number 1 seeded Detroit Pistons on Saturday. Then the Portland Trailblazers come in to visit, and they are a very underrated group as well in the Western Conference, a young rising team that are phenomenal defensively and rebounding as well. Then another cup night against the Miami Heat next Wednesday, which will be against the Miami Heat, and then another cup night that Friday against the New York Knicks in MSG. So then they kind of get a little bit of a break with the Nets and the Wizards following. But this next 6 game stretch against some of the best that the Eastern Conference has to offer, and an up and coming Western Conference group, I don't want to say that it's really the make or break stretch of the year, because it's not the case. But if the Bucks come away losing 4 of those 6, or 5 of those 6, or even 3 of those 6, um, maybe my confidence in this team kind of drains a little bit, because again, this is a stretch where they have a lot to prove. That over the course of this past weekend, the expectations for them have, evidently kind of tanked a little bit, with, struggling to beat the Hornets after losing to them in a blowout and then losing to the Lakers in a blowout. The morale maybe could be a little bit lessened so far, but this next stretch is going to be absolutely massive. Again, Cavs, Sixers, Pistons, Trailblazers, Heat, Knicks. For your next 6, that is not an easy schedule whatsoever, and it's going to be an absolutely huge time for the Bucks to prove that they can stick around and they can hang with teams that are, kind of the titans of the Eastern Conference right now. But anyways, that'll be it for me today. Thank you very much for tuning into another episode of Bucks Latest, presented by Fan Arch. Once again, I've been your host, Dean Simon, and before you go, please leave that like, leave that comment down below, and subscribe. Still trying to hit 2,000 subscribers over here, so if you want to join in that process, please do so. Turn on post notifications, and I will see you guys in the next one. Go Bucks.